Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good lunch. We're going to launch into preparing for critical incidents with Eric Risdahl. So, Eric, go ahead.
Thanks, Curtis. All right, everybody. Eric Risdahl, I'm Fire Management Specialist with Northwest Oregon District and acting FMO of that same unit currently. I apologize in advance, but I don't have my laptop with me as I'm on family vacation, but Megan is going to graciously help me with PowerPoint. So what we're talking about is critical incidents. How do we prepare for them? How do we manage them? And how do we deal with them? It's not a if, it's a when. And we're all going to deal with it. If you haven't before, you will at some point in your career. And that's just the reality of the business we're in. Next slide, please. So again, we do everything we can to make conditions in the workplace as safe as we can for our employees. But that potential is high that something bad is going to happen on any given day, and we need to be prepared for it. That leadership support for our folks, planning ahead for an incident, which, if we've got a planned incident like a prescribed burn, that's something we can really plan for. But on a wildfire, we don't know what's going to happen on a given day, but how we prepare and that we prepare is very important, because the nature of these tragedies, they run the full gamut from a broken leg to, unfortunately, mass casualty fatalities. Next slide. So first thing, we're going to identify what is it we have and what can we use to be prepared for an organizational response. What are those plans and what are the tools we have available? Next part is identifying the actions that we can take and need to take during that incident response. And then finally talk about training opportunities, because as everything we have, none of it's intuitive. So we need to do the best we can as leaders, both as AAs and FMOs, to be prepared by taking the appropriate training. Next slide. All right, perfect. So the plan, this is an NWCG standard, agency administrator guide to critical incident. It's very generic. Each agency has their own, and within each agency, individual units may or may not. There is a Region 6, plan. The Willamette National Forest has its own version. There is a State of Oregon BLM plan, but Northwest Oregon District has their own version. You may use the standard one, or you may customize it to your needs on your individual unit. And that's important, is to know what your plan is and be able to follow it and to ask for help. That contact is going to include contacts, like who needs to be notified and how do you get a hold of them. And having their work phone probably isn't enough. So make sure you're going deep enough into the layers. Pre-incident checklist, organization, roles and responsibilities, and dependencies for all the different types of background stuff that you're going to need. I'm calling it the SIOF because that's what I'm used to calling it. That serious incident or fatality is the critical incident response plan that we have used in the Pacific Northwest. Just informed earlier that the Forest Service is changing. Theirs is going to be emergency response or fatality. It's still a plan, a well-intentioned, well-thought-out and practiced plan for how we respond. And that is guidance for handling death and serious injuries to all employees. And when I say all employees, as it shows, everybody. It's our contractors, it's our cooperators, it's our employees, whether they're permanent, Job Corps, ADs, volunteers, etc. And this class, just need to be said, we think highly about fire, but it's also day-to-day things, bad things happen. And so this is a fire group here, but it may not be a fire incident we're responding to. The intent is to provide immediate assistance and support to survivors, as in on that crew, families and coworkers of those who die or are seriously injured while on duty. One of the recent ones that happened on the district I worked on was a member of the road crew who was turning around in a wide turnout and went off of about a 300-foot drop and did not survive that incident. Happened in the wintertime, so not the time of year we think of when we think of fire, but again, it just highlights the importance of these plans and being prepared. And it will clearly define the roles and responsibilities of all parties. The who. I went through the Oregon State plan for the BLM to see who all is part of this, and it is a very long list. And if anybody's ever been involved in the PSYOP, there may be 60, 70, 80 people on that initial call. And sometimes you got to filter down because too many people, too much noise, and that you can't be effective. But that agency administrator, Forest Soup district manager, I just want to say right here, when we say line officer, agency administrator, Forest Soup district manager, they may be different people or they may be the same person, and that'll be a case-by-case situation. Dispatch is always going to be involved, as that is who's going to make sure we get what we need, the way we need it, and how we need it, in a timely manner. Hospital family liaison, very important to make sure that our folks are taken care of and their families are as well. If it's a really bad outcome, funeral home and honor guard, and the agencies do handle that slightly differently, but every agency has it. HR, that paperwork stuff down the road to, do the things they do, whether it's paying bills or on the benefit side. LEO is going to be involved for investigations to make sure we have all the information we need and to help basically a lot of times secure that initial scene. Public affairs, we work in a real-time world now where if we don't put stuff out there and get ahead of the story will build its own legs, and it may not be the truth, but that's what people see. So that having them involved as soon as possible is very important. That safety manager or risk manager also has a very key role here. And then again, from the PSYOP, we have two key positions: the PSYOP commander, which they have the responsibility of the entire process to make sure that things are getting done in that timely manner. And that could be a risk manager, it could be a operations, operations person or regional, it could be an FMO. This whole process is scalable up and down. And then the SICO, Serious Incident Coordination Officer, that's kind of, I think of that person as the person that's keeping everybody on task. It's keeping that process rolling so we're not getting hung up in the weeds and spinning our wheels unnecessarily. Content is huge. When I compare the Region 6 plan, and off the top of my head, 24-ish pages, and the state of Oregon BLM plan is 70-some pages. It's the same information. It's just about how in depth the individual agency goes with that information. And again, for both those plans, the individual districts and forests have their own, which will be tiered off of that, and maybe more or less the same or even more detailed. That contact, though, again, the key contact numbers. If you have to get a hold of an AA and all you have is their work phone and they're on vacation, just because they're on vacation doesn't mean they do not need to be notified. Because like anything, we don't give away stuff when we leave. We have to make sure people are in the loop. We have to make sure they have all the information they need rather than ambushing them when they return to the office on Monday. That process flowchart is important. Again, keep us on task. That first call is a huge one. Unfortunately, I was part of several last summer, and they were very well run, even though it was last minute, 10, 11 o'clock at night, very well run based on following a good plan. That preseason checklist and responsibilities, that is, again, we have muscle memory. What we train for is what we can do. If we don't train for it, you come into it blind, we're not going to do as well. And it's our responsibility for our people to do the best we can for them in this situation. Organizational charts and the small care team. And the way it's laid out is in 3 phases. That initial response, 24 to 48 hours. And I can tell you the one we did out of between Burns and John Day last summer for the down seat, it was less than 24 hours. We were already in the second phase. And that's just because these are guidelines. They're not meant to be adhered to, black and white. The plan is based on a guideline, but the incident is going to dictate the pace and scale. And then that phase 2 and phase 3, that phase 3, that can go on and on. It could go on for weeks at a time based on the situation and what we're dealing with. If we're talking, a broken leg and extraction, or we're talking a Yarnell Hill, again, that's the point, is that these are going to be scaled on the incident. Line officer, and just trying to think of all of us, forest, that could be the forest supervisor, BLM, district manager, wildlife service, refuge, park and superintendent for the park service, superintendent for BIA, state, it could be a unit or district manager. You can take that chart on the right and you can remove forest supervisor. This is not intended to be agency specific. We all have a similar process, but this one lays out really nicely the who and the when. And the point is, are they getting done and has it been created? We all know if it's not written down, it never happened. And this is to keep us on task, on track, so spinning our wheels and assuming somebody has done something that hasn't been done. That first 24 hours for a supervisor, and that this is the supervisor of the affected employee. It could be an engine captain. Probably though at this level, it's going to be an FMO. If it's on a fire, it could be a district ranger. It could be a field office, manager. But making sure that the correct forms are completed for a serious injury fatality. They're going to work directly with the hospital family liaison, collecting all related incident information from what happened, which is going to be hard because it's not all, instantly known. You could be on scene or remote. If this happens on your unit, that's one thing. If this happens to a crew member who's in Florida on a burn assignment, it's completely different. So be thinking about all the ways in which you communicate with your folks. And now when you send folks out, this may change your mindset a little bit to make sure, do I have what I need? Do I have a way to get a hold of people? It's easily forgotten that the affected crew and coworkers, those folks are feeling this too. It's not just that one individual who's affected. Their home unit crew, the crew with them on a fire or an incident, they need to make sure they get care as well. We can often think of that person, get them medical care, but what about if the other folks are affected? And then following additional duties as detailed in the SIOF or critical care plan. The line officer plays a major role, that providing leadership. And again, that line officer, it could be the district, it could be the forest, it could be the refuge. That line officer is a generic term, so don't get too hung up on that. I went through this several times, and we sometimes use them synonymous, and sometimes we use them as a very direct term. But somebody in that leadership level is going to take that role on, and they'll be identified, and making sure that the AA is 100% in the loop. And again, they could be the same person, but that upward information is made, and that team of resources assists the incident provide leaders intent, make sure that gets done. And that is why we have these checklists. This is to make sure that everybody is to be in the loop is in the loop. And that is a surprising list if you've never gone through one of these. And the reason I changed this one from what it said previously, it could be a duty officer, it could be the risk manager. What is your plan saying? Who's been delegated? But the National Energy Fire Coordination Center needs to be notified if there's a fatality, entrapment, or burnover. That has national significance. Identify law enforcement to serve as a local law enforcement liaison, because when any of these situations, federal law enforcement, state law enforcement, county and local may all be involved. So having that one person as a point of contact is vital to make sure that people aren't, over involved. Imagine somebody dealing with a tragedy and being interviewed by 6 different law enforcement agencies, and what that impact is upon those folks. And then determine the capabilities and limitations of the organization. Request assistance as needed. Is this a big incident where you need a huge team, or is it a small incident? And that first call will often kind of ferret that information out. So then that SIOF team or critical response team, they're going to strategize with the immediate supervisor of the affected employee or employees, the liaison officer for the unit, and law enforcement to make sure that the correct and appropriate notification is next of kin. Help meet the family's immediate needs, because that family has needs as well. Make personnel available to assist. Work with tribal leadership immediately, or for cultural considerations if that introduces a tribal member. These are things that are, not necessarily intuitive, depending on who you're working with and what you're used to. And then exchanging accurate information about the incident to leadership at appropriate levels and with law enforcement, because that is key. Again, no information can be a bad place. Now, You may have to think about how much to share, and that's also going to be situational. And a lot of it, think of the red face test. Do you feel like this needs to be shared? Is this important? Or maybe this needs to be held closer and the right person needs to have this information. And that's going to be tough. There's no way to sugarcoat this. This is not an easy process when these things happen. I think the key to this, just like so many of the things we do, is making sure we have leaders' intent. Is your leader's intent shared and is it clear? That's going to be the framework of communication that employees can use to respond to a critical incident. If they don't know what you want, people will go with what they think is best. And often we all have a different idea of what we think is best. So getting that set up front, I think, is vital. It'll provide a detailed overview of roles and responsibilities before, during, and after. Again, this is often a traumatic process and a traumatic incident. So making something simple and clear on who does what can help us get through it, as well as the people who are there to help. It defines overarching goals and an end state to be carried out by a delegated care team lead. So care teams are those folks that come in to help for the survivors and the families. And these, you've all heard of CISM and stuff like that. That's kind of a lot of what we're going to be talking about. What is that support that you can get there immediately to alleviate that administrative workload, key activities, and provide support? And those kind of things could involve honor guard. It may involve watch, at a location where a fatality where the body sits until they can be cared for, so they're not left alone. It could be helping support to that family and to that unit that's affected. They have subject matter experts who serve as advisors to the local unit, and they may be locals or they may not be. These differ. The BLM honor guard does a lot of our CISM. Forest Service have a very good standalone CISM program, and they're separate from honor guard, but they coordinate with each other. But again, now we're here to help providing that care for folks. And one of the things that's out there that's emerging in the last couple of years, if you have one of these incidents, is the valuable use of dogs. We have people who are available to bring dogs into a unit, and it's surprising how good, when something bad happens, having a dog there, what it does for people. Just kind of a very easy and nice thing to provide if you have these situations. Those care teams will have clinicians. They may or may not have dogs, and then they'll have some CISM folks. Be a couple org charts here. This one, it looks busy, but this is the small model of what you're talking about. If you've got a fatality or serious injury, dispatch is always there in the program manager, and it kind of goes two directions from there. This is modeled on a forest, so that support staff, hospital liaison, family liaison, all that stuff, and a long-term care team. And then the other direction are all the different people that need to be coordinated. Like if you have an incident management team, which may or may not have a liaison back to the forest or to the district or the refuge. And then all those people on the left are, your standard folks that work on those units. And this is, even though I said this is the small model, you can see there's quite a few parts and pieces to play. Versus the next slide. It's like any fire or other incident, it can expand to the level necessary. This one shows, whereas the other in the previous model, some of those folks may be doing 1 or 2 or 3 of these pieces. In this case, it's blown up to show all the duties. So that care team may have 1 to 3 people in each of those functions. Again, I think of like a broken leg or a single fatality to a ERNL. It's a very different process, and we can scale up or down. And it's rare that the unit is going to be able to field all these. I believe when we had the seat fatality this year, we had people from all across Oregon, Washington, and a few national folks to help us get through that process, which took about 3 or 4 days to work itself through. And getting that and asking for help, I think, is a key thing that needs to be said here. If you don't have what you need, ask for help, because there are people who are always willing and able to help. Next slide. Line officer, again, immediate action, obtain accurate information, notify the appropriate people above you, go back to the home unit leadership, which is going to be your staff folks, to coordinate. If it's from another unit, I had an injury last summer, actually twice significant injuries, and I had to call around to find the correct state duty officer to make sure I was able to share that information. In one of those two cases, they were already aware, and the other they were not. This is just part of, hey, you got a busy fire season, and you've got people from all over the country that something happens on your unit. Make sure that their home unit knows, because we need to make sure that they're doing what they need to. We don't want things to be found out from them on Facebook or other means. Potentially notifying extra kin. I would urge you to involve law enforcement in that. They're better trained. Have them help you if nothing else. Assign liaisons delegated according to the SIAF plan. And again, back to that, are your affected employees' immediate needs met? Food, water, sleep, a private space away from the incident. When something happens on a crew that's on an incident, make sure they're taken care of. That is very important. It's easy to focus on the person we've lost, and sometimes the people we still have are the ones that we really need to be helping. The geographic CAT manager, that is that subject matter expert. I work with several, Patty O'Brien for the BLM, Paul Zer for the Forest Service in Pacific Northwest. And they are the people that if there's a problem, call, and they have the answers. And if they cannot, they can get us the answers. And that's very important. Instead of trying to make it up ourselves, I know a lot of us we're can do attitude. There are people better suited out there for some of these positions, and that's just something we should all be thinking about. Hospital family liaison. That's an interesting one. The Forest Service, it's actually a red card qual. The BLM is not yet, but we're working on it. And that's someone who can be a conduit between the affected and the family of a deceased or injured employee. Just to put a plug in for that, the Redmond course, I believe, is full this year. There's one in Springfield in April that's about half full at this point in time. And one thing we've done in the Pacific Northwest the last couple of years has been a major success is we are staging folks with these qualifications and training in towns with hospitals adjacent to one or multiple fires. So we have somebody already there when someone comes in on an ambulance, and that's a very powerful tool. And I've heard many times people that have come out of unconsciousness, and we're blown away to know that somebody's there to take care of them. I think it's the least we can do for our employees. And it doesn't matter if they're agency or contractor. Care team lead advisor, again, subject matter expert on policy. And that agency policy is key. We're all in this together, but we also have to recognize we're going to have little intricate differences in our policies between agencies. And so making sure we have the right policies and the right paperwork done for our employees is key. What direction is that we need to be go? Who can coordinate those tasks best and identify action items? And then leading that care team is a part of affected family or unit. Again, okay, there we go. Funeral memorial liaison, provide accurate, consistent information. They're going to be often sitting with the individual, and it could be at a memorial home. It could be at a air base. It could be in a lot of places, depending on the situation. And they're going to be helping with a lot of that stuff. They may be coordinating on our watch. Again, the Forest Service, that'd be the case. I know for the BLM, Honor Guard usually does that, a lot of that funeral memorial liaison work. But working with the local unit, what are the needs? Where are we going? How are we transporting? And it's a tough thing. And it is also something that's probably provides one of the most rewarding things to the families. Take care of the employees, SISM and EAP. That SISM, that short-term crisis intervention, 24 to 72 hours after an event, provide stress response, education, mitigation, peer lead with mental health professional. I'm sure there's several of you in this class who have gone through it. I've gone through it a couple times. I was forced to go through it once when I didn't feel a need. I can tell you it wasn't very effective. So everybody's going to process things different. It could be tomorrow, or it could be 3 weeks from now when you need to cross that. EAP, that after stuff, that counseling support, where depending on your agency has different agreements where you can get outside of work help, whether it's counseling, whether it's talking to somebody, for whatever it is you need, and that short, moderate, and long term. And they have all kinds of options available. And then interventions. I'm not going to try to explain this because there's a lot of different ways it is. And I think the important thing is to recognize every one of us processes different. We process trauma in different ways. Some just need a shoulder to cry on, and some need answers because they're pissed off and they want to know, why did this happen? What can we do different? And then you may have these happening as an individual. You may have it as a whole group. It may be, that 20-person crew is sitting there working through it, or it could be one person individual. The important thing is to be aware that this is there, and offer, from my personal perspective, offer it to your people. Don't force it, because it will be resistant. And some people, they need time to process that they need to process. And training. Moving on. You Will Not Stand Alone is a course that's been around for, I'm going to say, 15 plus years now. You gain knowledge, resources, and a support system to prepare yourself and your home unit for response to a critical incident. You will identify home unit strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities to plan for and prepare for critical incidents. One thing I want to say about all these courses, you may go to one of these courses and say, this is not for me. I went to family liaison and decided, I'm glad I have this information, but I don't think I can be a family liaison, and that is okay. Don't feel like going to this means you are indebted to the agency to become one. If you recognize, nope, this is not for me, and this is good background information, I think as a leader, that's important. And because you now have that background, maybe you can identify in your organization who does have those skills, and that's a very important thing. Next slide. Care team leader, understanding the role of how CAP works, Casualty Assistance Program, and how it's going to support employees, family members, and other survivors impacted by a critical incident. Make sure you learn the purpose of the care team, and that you'll get in that class. The duties of each member. So what is everybody's roles and responsibilities? And where do you find policy and benefits information? I discussed with working at an incident management organization. One thing that it's easy to lose sight of is it doesn't matter what agency we come from. There's a darn good chance that who we're going to help is not from our agency. So knowing where we can find the information is important. If I'm on an incident and I'm there to help out and it's Fish and Wildlife Service, I know someone from Fish and Wildlife Service I can call and say, hey, I have this situation. Who do I need to talk to? And that's key, because none of us can do this alone. Again, that hostile family liaison workshop, as I said, the one in Redmond, I think, is full. We're doing one in April after Easter in Springfield. And it just, again, how do we prepare people to help people? It is our duty, I've said that a couple times, that we are trained, competent, and prepared to protect our employees when something bad happens, not if, because there's no way to mitigate all risk 100%. So providing accurate and consistent information regarding the resources and support available to employees and their families following an injury or fatality. There's a toolkit, resource support network, tools for self-care for yourself, because these can be traumatic for you and someone helping somebody go through this. There are incident-based scenarios. There's a medical practitioner. Review the response plans and creation of a serious or incident fatality plan, SIOP, plan review. These are all very important tools. And again, I can't understate how important this one is. CISM. CISM should not be a foreign term to, I believe, most of you. Critical incident stress management. Recently, in the last couple of years, has become pretty well shared. That's like DNR and Oregon Department of Forestry is also doing some of this stuff. And there's this international standard, which I believe they're trying to follow as well. So it's definitely, it's taking on legs as it should. Basic SISM, assisting individuals and groups in crisis intervention. It's a 4-day class. Following that, become competent in that practice. Then they have the advanced one, and that's one for like a SISM team lead, and another 4-day course. Death notification training. I honestly didn't even know this was a training. I'm not surprised though, because it's not something that I would know how to do myself. But it's something that has to be done at times. And I believe if my loved one was to pass, instead of having an Oregon State Trooper show up, having somebody from the office that I know that my loved one worked with would probably be a whole lot more important to me. So there's something to think about. But again, it's not something for everyone. Targeted learning for line officers, etc. State leadership, LE&I, etc. Sorry about that. Resource and toolkits. Leave this one up a little longer because I put the web address in there. So if those of you want to screenshot this, that'll take you right to the CAP catalog for 2024 and 2025, which has all of these. It's all agencies. It's pretty heavy towards Forest Service and BLM, but like all of our training, all agencies are available and able to take these courses. Unlike a lot of our traditional training, that's not through the learning portal. It's directly a Google form through this catalog that I have the cover of on the right. These are great courses. If it's something that you want, it's something you should look into. Or again, as leaders, do you have future leaders that work within your organizations that you think might be good candidates? It'd be good to share with them. So our objectives: identify products and services to frame an organizational response, i.e. the plan, which again, SIOF, critical response. It doesn't matter what it's called, but a plan needs to be there, and it needs to be known, and it needs to be where people can find it. Too often we have a plan and we put it in a SharePoint site, but people don't know where to find it. And so make sure that the right people know where it's at. And then those actions that we need to take during a critical incident response, like does the toolkit, which may be in the plan. And then those training opportunities, skills, learning portal, the CAP catalog. I put in there the pre-positioned hospital liaisons during heavy incident response. Again, putting people, I think last year, I think the count I heard was we had 44 hospital liaisons in Oregon and Washington pre-positioned from about the second week of July till late in October near key hospitals. And often that was 44 individuals. Some of them took multiple 14-day assignments. And the one great takeaway from that, in addition to providing our folks care, this has allowed us to have a qualified with a trainee to learn those skills from somebody who's been doing it. And I think we're to questions. There's stuff in the chat. First question, yeah, that CAP catalog, that's where you can find a standalone. I can tell you from most of these, you can also use just Google, and quite often they'll come up. I always start with the learning portal, but again, these are not in there, but that's always a starting point. State or contractor, injured in a federal incident, what we can. Thanks, Josh. That's a good question. And that's something that I want to say, I think culturally in the Pacific Northwest, we have done very good. 10 years ago, it was not my problem, is what I would hear that from safety folks. I heard that from comps claims, and that's just not good enough. That's not even something we should ever say. So this year, last year we had to remind people, but this year all of a sudden we were hearing across the GAC how hospital liaisons were there helping contractors, helping state employees. So at the root of a hospital liaison is, and I'm going to tag Matt Holmstrom, which you heard from later, is are you a general good person? That is that bottom line. Are you there to make sure they're getting critical care? The paperwork, there's certain things we can and cannot do, and I'm not the expert on that, but your job is to make sure you're there as a patient advocate at its root. Again, we're not promising payment. We're not promising to be okay. We're there to make sure that there's somebody there looking for the answers to any questions they have. Oh, and it looks like, thanks, Nick, that for the answer. Any other questions? All right, well, that is what I have. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks, Eric. Really appreciate it. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so why don't we take a 10-minute break? And let's be back here at 1/2 past the hour. See you guys then.